Hello and welcome to the Now Spinning Magazine podcast with me, Phil Aston. And on this episode, I'm delighted to have with me Adam Holzman. Adam is probably one of the most innovative keyboard players of his generation. Keyboard Magazine has put Adam in one of the top 10 players in the world. Jazz is probably your middle name, really, for the kind of music that you've been involved with. But we're here to talk about the new album by Trifecta, which is called The New Normal. Now, this is a really interesting project, an interesting band. This is the second album that you've done together. And it's a band that came together from literally you coming playing during sound checks and during rehearsals. Is that correct?
That is correct. We would have some lengthy sound checks, and we would sometimes jam and come up with little ideas, and then one of us would record it on a phone. What happened was the pandemic hit, and everyone was stuck at home, and we started working on these little projects. We called them fragments at the time, and that became the first album, Fragments, which is based on, even though a lot of it was recorded remotely, it's based on ideas that we all came up with while playing together. So it doesn't really have the same kind of clinical quality that a lot of email albums have, you know.
Yeah, because I know from the amount of people I interview that is the way that a lot of albums come together now, isn't it? By people remotely just sending literally fragments backwards and forwards until they build up the picture.
Unfortunately, I miss the old days where you all go in the studio, or even if I'm doing an overdub session, I miss going down to the studio and working directly with the artist. You're kind of in your own little world. The plus side of it is you have plenty of time. You're never in a rush to finish something real quick. So you do, if you want to do really good detailed work, then it's a good thing. But yeah, long story short, the project started from these little snippets from jams and stuff. We had a sound check, and it went on from there.
The first album, although they're similar, obviously it's the same band, but I feel that listening to them back to back, they are different in their approach musically and how they've kind of come about. I mean, this one feels to me more jazz orientated, especially more jazz fusion, and it also has more quirky English kind of qualities sprinkled on top. Probably,
yes, we had a lot of that.
with the kind of spoken voice, etc., and things like that. But the opening song track is "Beck and Call," which is a tribute to Jeff Beck, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah, yes, I wrote it shortly after he passed away, as a matter of fact.
And it really has that kind of mid-70s jazz fusion feel. It sounds like something that would have been coming out of Wired or Blow by Blow.
That kind of stuff is home base for me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite forms of music as well. Was Jeff Beck an important influence on you? As you say, that's your home base. Was that kind of era of kind of jazz fusion really important to you?
Yes, he's definitely a big influence. I mean, not only is he one of the strongest voices on the guitar for decades. I mean, someone once called him the Miles Davis of electric guitar, and I think that might be true because he's able to take his voice and put it in all these different contexts, and beyond the jazz fusion stuff from the 70s. I prefer the term jazz rock, actually.
Okay.
But beyond the jazz rock stuff from the early 70s, he progressed into a whole electronic thing, and did some very experimental albums in the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. Working with drum and bass concepts and things like that. And so I think that the parallels with Miles are actually fairly accurate. But it's also Jan Hammer. Jan Hammer is my total hero, and some of the best stuff he's played is also on Jeff Beck albums. And the material. I mean, you can't beat songs like Lead Boots. Jeff didn't really write a lot of the material. He co-wrote a lot of it. But guys like Max Middleton and Tony Hymas and Simon Phillips, those guys came up with a lot of the stuff. And the material is great, too. That's why those records hold up. But I'd have to say that in the end, the most important aspect of the Jeff Beck classic era for me is Jan Hammer. He is the Charlie Parker of the Mini Moog. No one played synthesizer solos on a synthesizer quite like him. He's got a true voice on a Moog soloing, synthesizer soloing. Very few people have that, and it's kind of an art that's not as much explored these days, and I love that stuff, So
yeah, I've got but because Jan is also a multi-instrumentalist, isn't he? He can play various things.
He plays drums and then he programs great bass lines and stuff like that. But yeah, so he is you can consider him for sure a multi-instrumentalist, especially his scores for the Miami Vice show. That came later. That's, he's my hero because of Mahavishnu and his albums and Jeff Beck and stuff like that. The Miami Vice thing is a second chapter of his career, and I'm not as up on that.
No, because you've just, by talking about Jan, it's just reminded me of I've got an album by him called Like Children, which he did with Jerry Goodman.
That's a nice record. Yeah, him and Jerry Goodman from Mahavishnu did that record. Yeah,
it's a really good album.
Also, the first 7 days, his solo album, The First 7 Days, is one of my favorites. But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Because the song, talking about the kind of the kind of quirkiness of the Englishness of this album, it's in the song titles as well. And I know because it's jazz and there's not necessarily voices around, that you can easily come up with song titles that, Ouch My OCD, Chinese Fire Drill, which is a great, that's one of my favorites off the album, actually. Dot Are You Wooing?
Some of that stuff is my Zappa-esque inclinations.
Yeah.
An instrumental, like you said, an instrumental song can be titled almost anything, and a lot of it is Nick Beggs. He's a really funny guy. He's just got a natural sense of humor, and his spoken word stuff was sort of a new trip for us on this album, to blend in the spoken word, the more jazz rock stuff. There's some more experimental, loopy kind of electronic pieces, and then Nick's voice on top of it. We have a few more regular songs on this record. So this record overall is a little bit more composed than the last one. The last one was literally fragments, and this one is definitely a little bit more evolved.
So did you have more of a vision for what the overall album was going to sound like with this one before? Or was it literally each track came together and then you started to get a feel for the beginning, middle, and the end?
That's what it is. You just start working on material and getting getting a start, and then you start to get a picture of what you have there, and you can kind of carve out the rest of it once you have once it's kind of up and running. But there's still that initial phase where you have to grind out about half the material before it starts to take shape.
The other observation, I guess, for me is because it's jazz rock, is that normally, and a lot of these kind of albums that come out in this field, there's always a part where the artist or the musician stretches out in the song. I'm so used to it. You look through the song titles and you look at the song lengths, and they're always there might be one that's 5 minutes, but normally that's 7, 8 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever. And there's going to be people going off and doing their solos, etc. This isn't like that, is it? It's like as if any soloing is within the concept of the tune, with the tune and the music itself. You're not aware of it going off and doing a solo piece.
It's not yet. The format is a little bit more structured. We don't have long stretches where one of us blows for a while. And I think we might, if and when we play live, we will open it up a little bit more and do some more, open-ended playing. But the original concept, fragments, we made a pact: no song longer than 3 minutes. And part of that was sort of an anti-prog thing. Instead of having 3 15-minute songs, we decided to have 15 3-minute songs, which each idea has a little chance to sort of develop, and then that's it. We don't try to string a bunch of ideas together. At least we didn't then. We kept a little bit of that aesthetic going into the second record. We tried to keep things to the point. There is. I was thinking about that the other day, and maybe it's a good point. Maybe there should have been a couple of spots where we do blow a little bit more at length. But I think there's something about the tighter structure that keeps it appealing to a more general audience, possibly too. And we don't really lose anybody with long solos. So. I mean, I'll blow a solo, but rarely longer than 8 or 16 bars.
Yeah. You've also got some guest artists on this. Alex Lifeson from Rush is on there as well. I mean, did you any of you meet him, or was that a dialed in?
Well, it was dialed in, but we were fortunate enough to meet him. We hung out with him in, I think it was Toronto, in one of the last Steven tours, and we spent some time with him backstage. He's a great guy. Nick has known him for a long time. I think he's an old friend of Nick's, and Nick asked him to play on the track, and he was happy to. So there was a little bit of a connection. We all had met him and hung out with him a little bit, so I was happy about that.
Having such a rich background in both jazz and prog, I mean, do you feel that there's not that much difference really between these genres? I know you said when I mentioned jazz fusion, you said you preferred jazz rock. I remember some of my friends saying I don't like jazz, and then I remember putting on Romantic Warrior by Return to Forever, and they were, "Oh, this is good." I said, "Well, this is jazz rock."
Well. Okay, look, just for the sake of clarity, I like the phrase jazz rock because I think that actually goes a little ways to describing what it is. Jazz fusion can be anything, and I mean, Latin jazz is jazz fusion. There's lots of examples that are jazz fusion that don't. If you're talking about wailing synthesizers and guitars and that kind of high energy approach, I consider that jazz rock. Okay, so get that. Just saying, putting that aside. I think that the whole genre is really diverse, and if I mean the whole genre of jazz is really diverse, and so no one, if someone makes any kind of statement like they don't like jazz, they probably don't know what they're talking about, because I'm sure they've all heard stuff that they do like that is in more of a jazz context. I think that the main difference for me, well, I hope I don't offend anybody, but I think that that progressive rock instrumentally has gotten kind of dull over the last I don't know, I'll just say couple of cycles.
Yeah.
It used to be a time when you put on an album like Close to the Edge, and the first 3 minutes when the band comes in after the birds are tweeting, then the band comes in playing that really fast jazz rock 6/8 feel with Bruford playing definitely jazz approach on the cymbals, and the band is just flying, and they do these stops and these breaks, and they're really tight, and they go back into jamming, and then they lead it into the theme of the record. I don't hear instrumental stuff like that in progressive rock these days. Not that kind of intensity. A lot of it has sort of become I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it's post 90125, where the emphasis now is on getting a hit single. Even though it's in a progressive rock context, a lot of the music is just kind of plods along. It doesn't have that snap or that syncopated edge that a lot of the earlier progressive rock did, and that's where the connection is. That's where the connection is between jazz rock in the early 70s and progressive rock in the early 70s. There was definitely a lot of crossover in ideas and a lot of some commonality between the two genres. I think that progressive rock has become more and more of a sort of a format kind of thing. Ironically, they call it progressive, but really a lot of times the last thing it is progressive. It's sticking very, very close to certain norms that I think go against the idea of being, progressive. Don't want to do air quotes too much there, but so anyway, yeah. I mean, I can go on and on, but I think that that we're trying to bring back some of the instrumental edge in into this, and I think that the connection between jazz fusion or jazz rock, whatever, and prog rock is important and is there, and I think it should be emphasized more, and that's one of the things we're trying to do.
And sitting in amongst all of that, of course, is Stephen Wilson, who all of you are connected to, and a bit on his last album, and it will come up to the 10th anniversary of The Raven That Refused to Sing, aren't we? Which is an intense, kind of prog jazz album. But I guess Stephen is someone who doesn't repeat himself and does things that his audience sometimes take a second look to think, where's he taking us? But that is in a way what progressive music is you don't know where it's going to go next.
And he also has intense instrumental sections. He doesn't it doesn't just plod along in 4/4, just a long form song, but he's got, really distinct, different, exciting. His music is very exciting for me to play. And because there is, even though it's very structured, there is lots of places where you can be, you don't have to play the exact same thing necessarily every night, and there is sort of like a little bit of jazzy wiggle room in some of the stuff. Not only that, I mean, some of his instrumental sections really just start flying, and again, that's not something that you see every day. Usually things are much more locked down and under control, and I think it's great that Stephen takes risks and still pursues an intense instrumental angle as well.
Going back to the new album, The New Normal, there's a couple of places where Nick's bass playing reminds me a little bit of Marcus Miller, which then takes me back into that kind of groove you had with Tattoo with Miles Davis. I mean, there is, because I played that album as well yesterday after listening to your new one, and there is a feel. I mean, for any of you putting together a playlist, you can put together Trifecta's new album next to Tattoo by Miles Davis, and it works really well.
That maybe that's because of me. I don't know. What Miles album did you throw on?
I'm probably mispronouncing it. Tattoo, is it the first one you played on?
Tutu.
Yeah, Tutu. Sorry,
named after Desmond Tutu.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Right. That's the one. Okay, that's the correct one, at least for starters. Yeah. No, also that style is a big influence, and Nick is a pretty funky bass player. Who has some heavy funk grooves, and he's known for his slap bass playing and stuff like that. So, him playing in this kind of context, it's not that much of a stretch that he might sound a little bit like Marcus. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that.
And I think. And that's what gives the album such a wonderful feel. You've got the quirky spoken word bits, but there's also some singing on there as well, as you say. But these songs, I can see how you could, in a live setting, stretch out a little bit any way you like, just by looking at each other. And as I read in, I think what you'd spoken about earlier, that the three of you are like telepathically connected because of how you played with Stephen and various other projects, that now you're working on your own material, you almost must second guess what the music requires.
That's true. I think that's true. We by playing together so much over the years on tour, we were able to do these projects fairly quickly, and very often me and Nick or Craig will throw ideas around, and we're completely accepting of whatever the other guy does. We never tell anyone to go back to the drawing board and change something. It's always basically our first stab at it, and in some ways that's the sort of spontaneous, still air of spontaneity in that aspect of it.
Yeah. I just want to go right back, because for some of my readers and listeners may not realize this, that they'll know you from, maybe they'll go back as far as Miles, and but mainly a lot of my reader listeners will know about Stephen Wilson. A lot of that stuff is that your dad formed one of the biggest record labels in the world, Elektra Records.
That's right.
And I just wondered, I mean, growing up in that environment, how much of an influence did that have on the musical direction you you took? Because obviously you played with you made a connection. I think one of your first albums was connected with The Doors, wasn't it, in a way, with Carmina Burana, that album, which is on the floor behind me. I mean, what was that like?
It was amazing. I mean, of course, it was my life, and I've got nothing else to compare it to. But growing up around that kind of a music scene, going with my dad to the recording studio and hanging around, and just absorbing all of what was going on. The Doors were my heroes, of course. I mean, they were Elektra's big group, but also at the time they were huge. They were one of the top groups, and now in the universe of classic rock, they're still huge. I was very fortunate to do that project with Ray Manzarek, and there's no way growing up in an environment like that wouldn't be a huge influence. I was a major Doors fan, but then I started getting into the whole gospel rock movement, especially. I say gospel, I mean stylistically, like Leon Russell and Joe Cocker, and especially Leon Russell's piano playing. And so I was totally into the Doors and Leon Russell and Boogie Woogie and all this kind of stuff. But it didn't really come together until I started listening to jazz and when I was a teenager. Then all the styles and all the genres, I could kind of see how everything fits together a little bit more. And me and my buddies used to party we would blast Art Tatum and be rocking to that, and then turn around and play Zeppelin and stuff like that. So we were pretty, we were pretty curious bunch. But yeah, I'm sure where I'm going with this. I'm sorry, I think I've lost the thread here.
No, I was just very interested because obviously the Doors was such a big thing to your dad's label, and they basically it erupted from that point. But obviously, also the Doors were into a lot of the instrumental sections. The guitar and keyboards was jazz, wasn't it? There's a jazz feel to it all the way through.
Oh, the Doors definitely had a jazz influence, and I'll let you in on a little secret. Here's a scoop for you. I might be doing a project with John Densmore.
Wow,
a jazz record, yeah.
Oh well, that would be.
So anyway, maybe keep that on the side for now. But I mean, just to show you, the connections are actually ongoing. Those guys are still my heroes. Every 3 years, I'll listen to all the albums again and hear new things. I really have come to appreciate how brilliant Jim Morrison was. I mean, those guys were heavy. Too bad they only made 6 studio albums, but those guys were heavy.
So with your dad seeing his son going into the music business, did he give any kind of words of wisdom and advice as you were heading down this path?
Yeah, he was supportive and encouraging, but at the same time, he wasn't totally on board. And it wasn't until I was playing with Miles Davis that he finally realized that I might have a future here. Yeah. I think it was a normal parental concern, when your kid goes into the arts, and it's definitely. Freelance lifestyle is a little bit more, I don't know, a little less stable than some things. I mean, when I guess I was like 19. I went to see Weather Report play at the Long Beach Arena in Los Angeles, this big arena, and it was like a rock show. They had smoke bombs and stuff, and sound effects, and the band was killer. It was the era with Jocko and Erskine.
Oh wow, yeah.
And after the concert was over, I thought to myself, great, I'm going to have a stable future playing jazz rock.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a joke, anyway.
Yeah.
Never mind. Anyway,
yeah. But that's the thing, isn't it? That form of music, because I mean, you're wearing a very cool T-shirt as well from that band, from their one of their later albums. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, because jazz rock kind of went under the radar then, just like progressive rock did during the 80s, didn't it? It kind of disappeared for a bit, but.
It took on different forms. Some progressive rock bands retreated to their more natural state, which was very, very progressive. Other progressive rock bands followed the path of Genesis and tried desperately to get a hit. I guess the difference is it would usually be a pop or rock song with maybe some little twist. There'd be one break that's in 7/4, some synthesizer line for a few bars,
Yeah.
and that would be the only allegiance to what would be considered
To what
prog.
went before, yeah.
But yeah. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I also, just before we finish, I'd like to just mention, obviously, your wife Jane Getter as well, because she's got a new album coming out, and you're on that as well, aren't you? Which is again similar style of music as well. So
yeah, her stuff is more song oriented. I think there's only one instrumental track on her new album. The album is out actually. It's called Division World. And she's just got a nice write-up in Prog magazine and another nice write-up in Guitar Player. So she's getting some attention for it. We just played on the cruise. So she's getting attention for that. And stylistically, it's much more guitar-based. She's very much influenced by metal and the way bands like Tool and Porcupine Tree use metal components as part of a larger picture. She's definitely going down that road more. So yeah, there's some differences, but she's I'm super happy for her. I mean, she's definitely making some headway with this new record.
So it must be interesting in your house with your wife's more focused on metal and you're into jazz, how you must meet in the middle, who decides what to put on the turntable in the morning.
Yeah, the compromise is usually Weather Report. I don't mean to keep bringing them up, but I've been on a sort of a binge lately. I've listened to nothing but Weather Report since last July, with the exception of music I have to learn and play and perform, and music that I have to work on with students and stuff. But I almost 95% of my extracurricular, because I think those guys are so brilliant. They really are the nexus of jazz and contemporary music, and especially the albums through the middle period, and not only the Jocko albums are just so key to what I'm interested in anyway.
So if you had to pick 3 Weather Report albums to take to a desert island, or to help, or someone said, I don't know where to start with Weather Report, what 3 albums would you point them towards?
I would have to say, I might have to make it 4. Tailspinning, Mysterious Traveler, Procession, Domino Theory.
Ooh.
None of those have Jocko. Of the Jocko albums, of course, Heavy Weather is a classic, and Black Market, he's on only a couple tunes. That's also a classic. Mr. Gone is a completely different animal. That's almost a studio project on their part. It doesn't have the same kind of live Weather Report thing. It has a different feeling to it. I love it. I love hearing how Zawinul thinks in terms of electronics and synthesizers. But I would have to say Tailspinning, Mysterious Traveler, and then either Procession or Domino Theory from the later bands. But everything they do, Joe Zawinul is someone who is another a bit what's the word for it? A little bit of an unsung genius. He should be his work still dominates with musicians, but it should be put out there more. Somehow think that there's someone's dropping the ball somewhere. But anyway.
Well, if people want to find out more about your music, Adam, they can go to your website. Is it adamholzman.com? Is that where you've got the latest news? Yeah.
And the Bandcamp page has almost all my albums on there too. So the Bandcamp page is a good place to go.
And and that will take people through it, I think, to Bernie's Shed to buy your CDs and vinyl, I think, as well. That's
exactly
correct, isn't it?
And so that's a digital option there too. But I appreciate it. But anyway, I am very excited about the new Trifecta record, and with 2 albums out now, we're looking at trying to maybe pull off some live shows next year. So fingers crossed, we might be crossing paths with you in person at some point.
Yeah. So that would be great, because I know it's logistics, isn't it, playing live, and because the 3 of you aren't all in the same country. So
if I lived in, if it would be different. If those guys were in Europe, it would be easier for me to fly over and work. But the visa situation in England, excuse me, is very complicated, and so it's not easy for me just to pop on a plane and go over there and do a couple of gigs. If those guys lived in France or Germany, it would be. So it's just if that's just a
yeah, it's almost as if you could wave a magic wand that whenever you play with Stephen, that somehow you were the support act. Then at least you're in the same place.
Yeah, I wouldn't even want to. I wouldn't even want to attempt that to do the trifecta and Stephen in one night. Oh man,
that's true. Yeah, well, sorry. Yeah, well, I'm obviously completely forgot what it's like to be a musician. Then playing
well, I'm also working on another solo album, which you probably can't see it.
I can't yet see that. Yeah,
I have the artwork by Hayo Mueller. It's called Zombie Apocalypse, and it's going to be mostly piano and synthesizer, with some special guests. So that's going to come out sometime later this year.
And again, because my brain's suddenly thinking of all these other things. Haven't you just done one with your son as well?
We released an experimental track. That's just a camp release,
website, yeah.
and that was an electronic, pretty much an improvisation that we put. So that's this thing is style. Well, it's upside down anyway. It's stylistically different.
Right.
That's a pure electronica thing, but I love that zone too.
Yeah. Fantastic. So it's Trifecta, the new normal. It's out now on CD and vinyl. If you go to Adam's website, which I'll stick on the description tag and on this at the end of this video, you can buy it directly from Burning Shed in the UK. And as I say, go and get a physical copy. That's the best way to support artists.
That's right. Thank you. I appreciate that. That's a good point.
Yeah, and thank you very much for your time, Adam. And hopefully you do get a chance to play some of this album live, because I'm sure it would be absolutely superb. But I love all of it. It's a great album.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, man. I'm really glad you dig it. We've been getting a very, very positive response. So fingers crossed we can do something a little bit more elaborate in the future.
Yeah. It's what the world needs. It's called the new normal, but if the new normal is music that's joyous and lifts you up and makes you smile, then that's what we want, isn't it? So great.
I was thinking, the new normal is the band is anything but normal. So
yeah, well, that's probably, as you say, that's a bit of Nick sprinkling his magic dust over the top, isn't it?
Yeah. But anyway, well, thank you very much. It's been really nice chatting with you. Really appreciate it.
And you. All right, take care. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. A huge thank you to my guest, Adam Holzman, from the band Trifecta, and the album is called The New Normal. It's a great album. It's really quirky because of Nick Beggs's kind of vocal kind of sprinklings all over. It's very avant-garde, a little bit of a zapper in there, but it is jazz fusion, as Adam calls it, jazz rock. But to me, it's really more pure jazz. And as I said, there were parts where Nick Beggs kind of slapped basses, a little bit kind of like Marcus Miller, which reminded me of the Miles Davis album Tutu, which, as you noticed in the interview, I pronounced wrongly, but it's the album Tutu. It's wonderful stuff. This is their second album. The first one was called Fragments. This new one is out on vinyl and on CD, and I think you can still get the first one as well on vinyl and CD from Burning Shed. But make sure you go to adamholzman.com, where you can find out about all his projects and everything else he's been involved with. What it must have been like to have literally Jack Holzman as your dad, the guy that founded Elektra Records, growing up with the Doors and all of those fantastic bands in that period. Love, Judy Collins, absolutely wonderful stuff. But this is a great album, and it is, as I said here, it's Trifecta, and it's called The New Normal. It's out now. Highly recommended. So thank you for watching and listening. Please check out our podcast. There's loads of interviews and new features coming up called Meet the Collector. Check out the website, nowspinning.co.uk, and of course the YouTube channel and Facebook group. We're all over social media. Please subscribe, become a patron, become a YouTube member. There's lots of things to explore. Please take care. Remember, music is the healer and the doctor. Keep spinning those discs, and I shall see you all very, very soon.